Hello everyone and welcome to Happybara. I'm your animal bro and internet weirdo, and today, we're back to fighting animals. Last time, our fight with a gorilla didn't go so well, so Coach Happy's gonna go ahead and set you up with something easier. Today, you're fighting a Stegosaurus. Real talk, not as your fighting coach, but as your bro. Stegosaurus has more weaponry than your neighbor Cletus guarding his trailer park moonshine and is in the same weight class as an armored Humvee. You are so unimaginably f***ed. Part 1. Know thy enemy. And while we're quoting wise men, Twitter user Caucasian James said it best. You're not better than a Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus as we know it was born during something called the Bone Wars, a 15-year-long petulant slap fight between two old dudes named Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh. Now if you ask me, Cope was named correctly, but Marsh should have renamed himself to Seethe, because there was a lot of coping and seething going on across the world of paleontology thanks to these two. I mean, this pissing match ended in a literal attempt at a brain measuring contest. Science, when fueled by spite, is great at producing results, but accuracy, not so much. In 1877, Marsh took a look at a menagerie of bones that he had ripped from their eternal rest, which also included a bunch of sauropod teeth and a whole-ass Allosaurus tibia. Marsh took one look at this new discovery and immediately said, Cope, are you paying attention? I just discovered the biggest goddamn turtle the Earth has ever seen. Marsh named his new gigaturtle Stegosaurus, which translates to roofed lizard, because he thought those now iconic dorsal plates laid flat across the back like shingles on a roof. Today, and many different interpretations later, we now have a much better understanding of what Stegosaurus was actually like. And my god, you're gonna wish Marsh had it right the first time. Stegosaurus lived in what is now the western United States and Portugal during the late Jurassic, which means it lived alongside plenty of other iconic Jurassic dinosaurs, like Apatosaurus, Diplodocus, Ceratosaurus, and the most dangerous animal alive at the time, Allosaurus. Did you forget about the T-Rex? Jurassic Park told me there'd be a T-Rex. Don't feed me this bullshit, Dr. Happy. The day I forget about Tyrannosaurus Rex is the day I want you to take me out back and shoot me, because at that point, life is not worth living. What people don't understand is just how successful dinosaurs were, and still are if you count birds. I count birds. The non-avian dinosaurs were so widespread and lasted for so long that most of the most iconic dinosaurs never even met each other. The time between Stegosaurus and Tyrannosaurus was 20 million years longer than the time between Tyrannosaurus and you. So it's pretty safe to assume that dinosaurs are built different, and that goes double for your opponent. We're gonna go through every piece of relevant anatomy on this thing so you can learn what's gonna kill you and what weaknesses you can exploit to take the W. But before we get into that, this video is sponsored by me, begging you to please go check out the Patreon. Time is money, and baby, I'm running out of both. So if you want to help me speed up my production schedule while also gaining access to exclusive benefits, subscribe to the Happybara Patreon. You can't sell out if you were sold from day one. Part 2. The Scouting Report. Okay, so we're gonna take the mullet approach to this breakdown, starting off mild in the front before getting to the absolute nightmare going on in the back. Stegosaurus lived with what I call reverse T-Rex syndrome. Big-ass limbs, tiny-ass head. Stegosaurus' skull was filled with peg-like teeth, all except for the front, which was occupied by a delicate-looking beak. This dental anatomy combined with the skull's position tells us that Stegosaurus lived on a diet of low-growing plants. Now you may think that this low angle of the skull would make Stegosaurus vulnerable to axe kicks and flying knees. However, you might find that giving Stegosaurus a concussion is easier said than done, because that brain is kind of a tiny target. If we peel back the layers of the skull, we can examine the brain case, and Spike here's not going to be writing any research papers anytime soon. Because he's dead. Also because he's kind of a dum-dum. When Stegosaurus was found, it had the smallest brain-to-body ratio of any dinosaur at the time. Even in the modern day, it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that an animal the size of a mid-sized bulldozer can function with a brain the size and shape of a melted hot dog. In fact, scientists back then had such a hard time coping with it, they actually theorized that Stegosaurus had two brains, with the second one being located in a cavity in its hips, which activated like a secret power-up whenever it had to deal with external threats. Like you! This idea has long since been debunked. And since we live in the age of TikTok, it's much easier to accept that life can just be that stupid. But before we go jumping to conclusions, it's important to note that measuring intelligence is hard enough with animals that are still alive. Never mind animals that died 84 million years before grass was even a thing. Judging intelligence off of brain-to-body ratio is notoriously inconsistent. And that doesn't even factor in that intelligence is relative. If you were to judge Stegosaurus by its ability to be a plant Roomba and carry out the prehistoric equivalent of a prison shanking, then this would be the young Sheldon of dinosaurs. So, good news, bad news. The good news is that the head of this animal can be firmly placed in the not a threat category. The bad news is that this category is not getting any longer. Now moving on to the body of this animal. Now the first thing that most people notice is that, god damn, he's thick! The genus Stegosaurus is divided into 3 species, with the largest being Stegosaurus ungulatus, which tipped the scales at 5.5 tons and can grow up to 25 feet long. But despite its size, its legs were relatively stumpy, with the legs in the front being significantly shorter than the legs in the back. Building your body like a John Deere tractor does have some trade-offs. Good news for the incredibly attractive and intelligent people looking to fight this thing, Stegosaurus was not built for speed. If you spend some time jogging and upping your cardio, you might have a chance of outrunning it. But if you remember the sloth bear from my previous video, you'll know exactly what happens to animals when flight isn't an option. They double down on fight. And to say that Stegosaurus was an animal built to take and dish out punishment is an understatement. Stegosaurus was built like a medieval fortress. And what's the point of a fortress without some big walls to scare the crap out of your enemies? By far, the most iconic feature of Stegosaurus are the back plates that gave it its name. The length of Stegosaurus was dominated by 2 rows of modified bone structures growing from the animal's skin. These structures are called osteoderms, which literally translates to bone skin. Today, animals like crocodilians and some lizards also have osteoderms, but nothing compared to what Stegosaurus was packing. These plates were massive, with the largest being directly over the hips, growing to be 2 feet tall by 2 feet wide. As with most things, paleontologists aren't entirely sure what these were used for. But when you're confused about what the purpose of freaky animal parts are, you can always fall back on evolution's 2 favorites: surviving long enough to get laid, and getting laid. When it was originally discovered, Marsh proposed that these plates were primarily used as armor. But since paleontologists can't agree on anything, even if their literal lives depended on it, there was immediate pushback, citing that the plates were too fragile and oddly placed to be used as an effective defense. The Great Plate debate has been raging for literal centuries now, with plenty of guesses ranging from them being simple display structures to giving the 10,000-pound animal the ability to glide. I was gonna make a joke about how this was made during a time that Coca-Cola had actual cocaine in it, but this was 6 years after it was outlawed. Whoever drew this has no excuse. For the longest time, the prevailing theory is that Stegosaurus's dorsal plates were primarily display structures because, well, just look at it. Dude is throwing up a literal billboard. Ironically, the very same structures that might have been used to attract mates would have made mating kinda hard. One idea is that both dinosaurs would just throw it in reverse and then Shakira at each other until someone ended up fertilized. Look man, I'm just the messenger. Another popular theory surrounding the plates is their use as thermoregulatory structures, allowing the animal to heat and cool its body as needed thanks to specialized blood vessels found in the plates. However, Team Armor got a bit of a boost with the discovery of an exceptionally well-preserved specimen of Hesperosaurus, a close relative of your opponent, which suggested that not only did Stegosaurus's dorsal plates look scary as but they had the added benefit of being scary as This Hesperosaurus specimen came complete with fossilized skin impressions of the plates, showing that they were likely covered in a sheath of keratin, with scientists comparing the plates themselves to the bony cores found in horned animals today. This could mean that the plates of stegosaurs, including Stegosaurus itself, were much bigger and sharper than previously thought. But this alone doesn't rule out the possibility of them being used as display or thermoregulatory structures, since in nature it's pretty rare for structures to have only one purpose. But regardless, these plates are devastating news for any jiu-jitsu guys who thought they could end this fight quickly with a rear naked choke.
Go to sleep, brother, go to sleep.
But even without the plates, attacking the neck was never going to be effective, since Stegosaurus also had a full layer of mini osteoderms covering its neck, called gular armor, which functioned like a subdermal sheet of bone chainmail. Metal. Like every part of this thing, paleontologists debate exactly what it was protecting its neck from. But there's one part of Stegosaurus that's about as close to settled as paleontology gets. Stegosaurus lived in the Morrison Formation, a 600,000 square miles stretch of rock that was the closest thing the Jurassic had to literal hell. And this hell also had its own demons, like Ceratosaurus, Torvosaurus, and I'm a threat to myself and others because these claws are rated E for everyone itself, Allosaurus. So, in response, evolution gifted Stegosaurus with one of the most horrifying weapons an animal has ever used. At the end of the tail sat 2 pairs of 3-foot-long spikes arranged to look like a medieval torture device. Now, if you're gonna go through the trouble of growing a spiked mace out of your ass, it better have a name that means business or people might get the wrong idea. So, Stegosaurus can thank its lucky stars that in 1982, cartoonist Gary Larson gifted us with the name Thagomizer. And since A, paleontologists realized they'd never actually named the thing, and B, are massive dorks, the name was agreed upon almost immediately. What's also agreed on is that thagomizers were used as educational tools, and they taught a lesson that most things only get to learn once. Do not with Stegosaurus.
Let me tell you something.
When you're operating with a brain the size of a hot dog, very quickly the solution to most of your problems becomes a very good stabbing. And we have fossil evidence that Stegosaurus was a firm believer in this British way of thinking. Paleontologist Robert Bacher noticed that Stegosaurus lacked the ossified tendons in the tail that other dinosaurs have, meaning that Stegosaurus's tail would have been much more flexible than that of its relatives. The only shank-free part of this animal would have been right in front of it. But thanks to that John Deere physique we talked about earlier, Stegosaurus could swivel and throw that ass back in any direction blindingly fast. But if a flexible tail isn't enough to convince you that thagomizers are deadly weapons, I got one more piece of evidence that's pretty conclusive. 3 words. Fossilized crotch shot. In 2014, paleontologists were examining an Allosaurus specimen when they discovered that it was killed by a horrific injury that had gotten infected. By itself, injuries on Allosaurus specimens are not that uncommon. Allosaurus was an animal that lived and especially died by the phrase, "F it, we ball." But what was strange was the location and shape of this wound. Whatever had fought back against this apex predator had done so by punching through the Allosaur's pubic bone, and the murder weapon was not hard to identify. The size and shape of this puncture wound perfectly matched, you guessed it, the shape of a stegosaur thagomizer. This gives us 2 horrifying revelations. The first is that Stegosaurus could swing its thagomizer with enough force to punch through bone. And there's fossil evidence that it's gonna be aiming for your d***. Anyway, it's time to talk about how you can fight this thing. Part 3, the fight plan. Okay, let's get down to brass tacks. You're about to step into the ring with a cross between a demon hedgehog and Vlad the Impaler blown up to the size of a small bus. Now, I'm not saying things are hopeless, but making peace with your god might not be a bad idea. But lucky for you, I got 2 science-backed fight plans that might give you a fighting chance. Operation Cardio Bunny. Okay, so as established, Stegosaurus was not built for speed. So to make up for this, it developed an incredibly flexible tail, which means that nothing in a near 180-degree arc behind it is safe from a good dick stabbing. But this leaves a pretty decently sized safe zone directly in front of it. stay in this safe zone. But that's easier said than done, since Stegosaurus' squat frame allowed it to turn lightning fast to put you back in the kebab zone. So it's a good thing that you've been working on your cardio. You're gonna want to rotate with the Stegosaurus as it turns, keeping yourself firmly within the safe zone, running laps around it and landing jabs on the tiny ass head whenever you get the chance. Now mind you, this is going to do literally nothing other than piss it off, but this is still a fight, and you gotta look like you're participating. Continue this process until the dinosaur dies of old age, or remembers that it's 50 times your weight and bum rushes you. Operation American Dream. If you're watching this, you're probably a human, which means your brain is more developed than that of a Stegosaurus. However, you are also engaging in unarmed combat with a dinosaur, so I might be giving you too much credit. Operation American Dream starts the same way as Operation Cardio Bunny, with you staying in the safe zone. But instead of throwing the jab, you're gonna whip out your phone and you're gonna flash the Stegosaurus with clips from Rick and Morty.
I'm Pickle Rick!
The Stegosaurus, distraught that it's unable to understand just how funny a man turning himself into a pickle is, will seek to better itself by applying to study STEM at accredited universities. But since the Morrison Formation is located in the United States, it's likely that the Stegosaurus will graduate having accrued a minimum of $40,000 in student loan debt. Now the Stegosaurus is working at a disadvantage, considering how it has a huge gap in its resume, because it spent the past 150 million years being dead. In order to pay off the loans, the Stegosaur will be forced to take a corporate job completely unrelated to its degree, where it will then proceed to die a slow and painful death via office politics and meetings that could have been emails. You might not have succeeded in killing its body, but you succeeded in killing its soul, and I'd argue that's worse. After reviewing the scouting report and the fight plan, it's time to go over your chance of victory and your chance of survival. Unfortunately, I gotta put your chance of victory at 0 out of 10. It's devastating, but it's reality. Sorry to take a thagomizer to your dreams, but yeah, it's better this way. But lucky for you, Coach Happy puts your chance at survival at a slightly more optimistic 2 out of 10. That Allosaurus did end up dying of an infection and not the stab wound itself. So there's a slight possibility that Stegosaurus might not be up for finishing the job. Congratulations! You survived because your opponent has a tiny brain and likely got bored. And your most likely cause of death? Well, I'm sure you saw this one coming. Stabbing. If you learned anything from this video, I hope it's that despite evolution being all about change, some things will always stay the same. And no matter how far back you go, oversized vegans will always be the most terrifying thing alive. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know how you would fight a Stegosaurus. And if you feel like helping me make more videos like this one, be sure to check out the Patreon, where you can get exclusive benefits like early access to videos and exclusive stickers, like this one. The first rule of the Endangered Species Fight Club is to have fun. This has been Happybara, and until next time, take a page from the book of Stegosaur wisdom. Eat your greens and don't take any crap if someone's in thagomizer range. See you next time.